Ciao a tutti e benvenuti a questo talk di Angola Roma. Io sono Davide e stiamo aspettando che entri Francesco. Ok, intanto però vi introduco sia alla community che ovviamente al talk di Francesco. Allora, noi siamo la community di Angola Roma e organizziamo eventi a cadenza mensile. Qui potete trovare dei link per seguirci sulla pagina Instagram, sì, scusate, LinkedIn, Facebook, abbiamo un account Twitter, siamo molto attivi sul canale Slack, quindi consiglio a tutti quanti di entrare e ovviamente anche il canale YouTube da cui state seguendo questa live. E, a fine serata faremo delle estrazioni per delle licenze JetBrains, quindi vi chiediamo di compilare una survey, vi passiamo adesso il codice per accedere, il QR. Un attimo che c'è un problema di regia. Cambio slide. No. Ok, ecco Francesco. Va bene, quindi il codice QR magari lo passiamo a fine serata. Intanto vi introduco a Francesco, lui sarà lo speaker per questo talk, ci parlerà di applicazioni Progressive Web App, quindi credo che non ci sia altro da dire e passo la parola direttamente a lui.
Perfetto. Grazie mille ragazzi. Inizio solo i ringraziamenti in italiano. Just a few words in Italian to welcome and to say a few thanks to the Italian community, and then I will switch completely in English and all the talk will be given in English. Quindi grazie mille ragazzi, grazie mille Angular Rome per l'organizzazione, per avermi dato la possibilità di essere qui e ancora una volta avermi dato la possibilità di presentare per la community italiana. Abbiamo deciso di fare il talk in inglese in modo tale da dare un po' più di visibilità, quindi anche al di fuori della comunità italiana, proprio perché secondo me il tema delle Progressive Web App è molto interessante. Quindi, detto questo, iniziamo la presentazione and then let's switch in English. So, this talk will talk about, or will present a way how to transform our web applications into applications that are never offline. So how to make disappear actually offline web applications. And this is possible thanks to a really cool technology that is called PWA, or Progressive Web Apps. We will start seeing some generic benefits that the Progressive Web App bring us and to our applications. Then we will go deeper in exploring and describing what are the real aspects or the real technical components that make Progressive Web Apps so special. Because we have always to keep in mind that Progressive Web Apps are just normal web applications, but with some special characteristic, special feature that make them possible to be installed on a user device, make them very fast, make them even possible, and we will see how, to work completely offline. And we will see then through demo, and also we will focus specifically on Angular because we are interested in that framework, how we can create with Angular or we can turn our Angular project with the Progressive Web Apps. Good, but that said, let's present myself, even though I already got a very good introduction. My name is Francesco Leardini, and I work as a senior consultant and Angular trainer in Switzerland at Trivadis, in our headquarters in Zurich. Even though probably since the beginning, at least the Italian attendees probably already spot my origins. I'm from Emilia-Romagna, and I really miss some of our food there, or even wine, Sangiovese wine. Not that food is bad in Switzerland, but yeah, let's be honest, in Romagna and in Italy is by far better. But that said, let's start our journey in the Progressive Web Apps. Let's imagine a typical case, or at least let's hope that this will be again a typical case where we are going to work, we are commute to work, or we are just travel. This, for example, is the London Tube. So we are maybe in a tube, so in a gallery where the connectivity is not so good. Maybe we are reading our favorite technical blogs, and this is what happened when we maybe switch from one page to the next. Indeed, not a very good user experience. But nowadays, and thanks to Progressive Web App, we can overcome this limitation, or we can provide our user a much better usability, a much better user experience. And this is possible with the Progressive Web Apps and the so-called customized offline pages. So Progressive Web Apps allow us to create custom offline pages that are made of a set of static assets, icons, font files, HTML pages, or even some JavaScript files. So as a minimum, we can provide an offline page with some logo of our website or company, maybe with some information that might be interesting. For example, we are running an e-commerce website and our marketing department is launching a new sales campaign. So even though the user is offline, we can present there, nevertheless, some items that are currently on sale. So even though the user does not have an interconnectivity, still he or she can get some value, some information while offline and while accessing our page, our website. There are some other cases that go even a step further. For example, if you visit the Trivago website, that is something similar like booking.com as a website, as a domain, or at least for the German website, you will, and you are, after you visit it once, and then you visit it again and you are offline, you will be presented with an offline labyrinth game. This is a very cool and very interesting idea, because then this game keeps the user's attention locked to the page. And then as soon as the connectivity is restored, then the user will be redirected to the page that was originally requested. So this is a very interesting approach in order to retain and keep the interest of a user that otherwise, if he or she would get to the offline page, a customer would have been lost. And this is possible with Progressive Web Apps. Now, let's see our first demo. I kept this demo absolutely to the bare minimum. It's just a vanilla JavaScript, so no Angular, no nothing else in terms of framework or libraries, just a plain vanilla JavaScript. Just a couple of HTML pages to show how we can, or how easy is it to turn or to introduce offline capabilities to any web project. So let's analyze the files that are very few, so it's very easy to go through them. We have an index file, index.html, with the classical headers information, some static file, with headings and so on, nothing great. We will see then how does it look like live. So really nothing. And we import a main JavaScript file. In the main JavaScript file, we just register, if of course is supported by the target browser, we register the service worker. And the service worker is called sw.js. Here is where we really implement all the logic of the service worker. Now, if you don't know what a service worker is, don't worry. We will see later in detail what it is and how does it work in the background. Here, this demo just want to show you how easy it is to create an offline custom page. So this is our service worker file. We will see later the details. We can, in this file, we can listen to different steps that are part of the life cycle of the service worker. Especially in the install step, we typically pre-cache, or we wanted to fetch all the data that are really composing our core shell, or actually the minimum amount of data that we wanted to present our user as soon as the service worker is installed. So that all the files that we will cache within this event will be made available even when the user is offline, because they will be cached immediately while the service worker is installing. Let's see how does it look like. So we use the cache API that allows through the open method to pass the name of the cache, that of course should be unique, and then we resolve, because it returns a promise, we resolve it and we get the cache object. On the cache object, by invoking add all method, we can add an array of, let's say, of I was just checking the chat that everything is going well. So we can add to the cache all the static target files that we want to be cached while this install event is running. Here, for example, we can see that we have some icons, 5 icons in this case, some styles we want to show, and here, most important of all, is the offline URL. So a variable that keeps a reference to our offline custom page. We can just look at now is simply static HTML page with some information that we want to show. We will see later what it is. But for the target audience we have, in this case, people interested in progressive web apps, this information are interesting. So you will see what does it look like. Another important event is the activate event, always within the lifecycle of a service worker. And here, typically, we can check if other caches are existing and eventually wipe them, so that we are sure that all the caches that we are using are new or even any confusing, or we are not presenting old data. But for the sake of this demo, this is not important, this event. What is very important is the fetch event. In here, we can listen to the navigate requests that are triggered from our application. And then we can check if the request fails, then most probably we are indeed in an offline case. So the user does not have a connectivity, and then we can, if available, of course, but in this case, we already saved in the cache, here in the install event, we can always, thanks to the cache API, we can check if the requested URL is available, so does make a match with the set of URLs that are saved in the cache. Otherwise, meaning that we are, and of course we return this URL as a response if available in the cache. Otherwise, if the navigation request goes through successfully, we simply fall back to a normal request. This is already the code of the cache first strategy. That is also another very important concept of progressive web apps, what we will see later. So just take these lines of, if we have connectivity, just return the normal request that goes through the network. Let's see then how does it look like, this code. Of course, we are online, and we can see, there's nothing over now. If you go on the dev tools and we pay attention to the application tab, we can see that we have a service worker that is activated and running. Here, just for the sake of curiosity, you can check also other, let's say URLs to show how many websites are currently using progressive web apps and service worker to enhance the functionalities and the performance of their websites. So when you're at home, just open the Chrome DevTools in the application tab. You can see here all the service worker registered already on the client side for other domains. Now, the important thing and interesting thing is that if I turn to offline and I refresh the page, we can see that I don't get the typical dinosaur because I am offline. But now we are serving our custom offline page, exactly as we saw before. Here I have just some static data that, as I said, could be interesting in the case of people interested in progressive web apps. So just some interesting facts about progressive web applications. But this is a very, very minimum, a very, very simple example to show how can you turn or how can you enrich any kind of web application with these very cool, I think, a very cool functionality, so that your blog friendly way to tell the user, hey, at the moment you are offline, please enjoy this static data in the meantime, but just a better approach. We will see that together with other modern technologies, we can even, in the next demos, we will see how we can overcome this, really bring even more advanced user experience for our users. Okay. So back now to our presentation. Now I give you a little quiz, a small test. It's just for fun. Another very good or another goal of progressive web apps is to try to provide an enhanced user experience, and by doing this is to try to provide an experience that is as close as possible to a native app experience. Here is a screenshot of my phone where I have installed the native app for Android of Twitter, and it's a version, the web version, so a progressive web app. Once installed, you can see the title and the icon are exactly the same. Plus, if you see even the layout of the application itself, it's barely identical. So there are very, very small differences, just maybe the header color and few little details. But other than that, it's very difficult to distinguish which one is the native app and which one is the progressive web app. I gave you now just a few seconds just to try to guess which one it is. Indeed, it's very difficult because, as I said, the differences are really minimal. But I give you now a little, or not so little, hint. This is the size of the each which native app and which one. This is another benefit of progressive web apps. They have a very, very small memory need the library apps. Therefore, they are extremely light in terms of disk space used. And this is very good, especially for mobile devices that are not so rich. They are not maybe the latest generation of models, so they are not really high-end. Still, we can provide a lot of benefit and enhance our web application even for these devices. So we can see at the end of the day, the differences are absolutely zero. Let's now step a little bit deeper into the technical part, and let's describe now what are the special components that make the progressive web app so interesting. The first file is a JSON file. It's called web app manifest. It describes or defines how our progressive web app will be rendered once installed on the user's device. Here you can see all the mandatory fields needed to show the so-called add to home screen dialog once the user accesses our web application the first time. Thanks to this dialog, if the user clicks on it, the application will be installed on the home screen of the device, and then from that moment on, it will look like exactly as a native app. Therefore, the user will see an icon, a title, and simply by clicking on it, it will render our progressive web app, our web application. Let's describe just a few of them shortly because they are not so complex. So we can define a name and a short name. That is a fallback if the name is too long, and this will be presented under the icon as soon as this is installed on the user phone. More interesting is the displaying property, because this shows how the user agent has to display in the browser our application. Browser is the default value. You can see that is exactly a normal layout that we get as soon as we access with our phone any kind of website, so not very interesting. But standalone is much more interesting because we can see that some of the UI elements of the page of the browser are taken away. For example, we don't have here anymore the address bar. And the application, when we use display standalone, will be opened in a separate tab of the opened applications. So not as a part or as a tab of the browser. So this also conveys a much richer experience and the idea of having not a web application, but a native app. And later in the demo, we will see how does it look like. Finally, we can use a full screen that, as the name suggests, takes the whole device screen. And typically, we use this value when we need to provide a game or a web application that has a rich media content. Aside of that, we can define a start URL because we want our application always start from the same point, like could be home or dashboard, because these also improve the usability and the user experience of our application. We don't want that the user access the latest page visited. As native apps provide, also progressive web apps allow a way to start always from the same page, no matter what was the latest page visited. And then a set of icons that we can provide. If all these properties are defined in a correctly, plus we have a service worker that we will see in a while, correctly up and running and installed, then you can see down here in the page that if the user accesses our page, it will present this added to home screen dialog. By clicking on it, the application will be installed. So pretty straightforward or pretty easy. We don't have to remember by heart all these properties. There are a lot of manifest generator. One of them, you can see the URL in the top right corner, that allows, thanks to a form, to provide all our specific values for our domain, for our application, and then we can download all the pre-configured JSON file properties for us. So we don't have to remember all these properties by heart. Inside the web manifest, we can also provide so-called shortcuts. This helps to increase the user engagement because allows to create some kind of context menu. Once the user keep, for example, on the mobile device, keep a long press on the icon. So we add this proper shortcuts array. So it's a property with an array of values. Each of these objects creates an entry in this context menu, and this shortcuts property is saved in the manifest file. In short, a shortcut is a link to an URL pointing to any page in our progressive web app. They are typically used to group common actions or important pages, so that with just one click, the user can go straight to that portion or to that area. Just one thing to keep in mind, though, is that shortcuts are not yet fully supported. They are available on Android in the Chrome from version 84 on, and on Windows, so Chrome 85 or Edge 85. Not absolutely widely supported yet. But there could be a good way to progressively enhance some functionalities according to which browser our users currently use. Let's see now the service worker that is absolutely the core behind the progressive web apps. Service worker is just a JavaScript file. Similar to a web worker that typically has a generic task, a service worker has a specific task. It acts as a proxy between the client and the server. So intercepting all the traffic from and to our application. It runs in the background in a separate thread from the one used from our web application. Therefore, is considered no blocking. And this is a good thing, because let's imagine there is a bug or the service worker is extremely under a heavy load because a very, very heavy task we implemented. We don't want that running on the same thread that the service worker might affect in any way the performance of our web application. Therefore, it runs on a separate thread. And this is also the reason why if even if we close our web application, and in case we implemented the push notifications, for example, the service worker running on a separate thread and still keeping running on the background can still receive in the background, even though the application, the web application is closed, can still receive push notifications. But let's see now a practical case. So the first time we access our web application, the first response, and with that, the service worker file that gets installed on the client side. Then on in the previous example. Then from this moment on, all the next requests will be intercepted by the service worker. And even if we are offline, if the requested data is available locally in the cache, then this data will be provided locally. This has a double benefit. On one side, our responses will be extremely fast because we don't have to go over the network to fetch them, and we can provide them straight from the local cache. And on the other side, even though the user is offline, still we can provide this response. So our application will still keep working. So this is how service worker runs, and how can we provide this offline content thanks to service workers. Everything starts by registering the service worker, as we saw before. And of course, it's always good to have a fallback. So if the service worker is not supported, either we gracefully ignore the whole case of providing or in the registering the service worker, or eventually we can notify the user that they should or she should use a newer browser. Let's see now what are caching strategies, because by itself, a service worker doesn't know by default what to cache and when to cache it. We have to instruct we have to tell the service worker which are the target assets we want to cache and which are the behavior should be followed. And this is done thanks to so-called caching strategies. This is very important because thanks to caching strategies, we can really drastically improve the performance of our web applications. And this is really crucial in if we look at the trend of mobile traffic that is, since the past 2 years, is really constantly taking over all the assets that come from desktop machines. So it's very important to keep mobile devices and mobile users in mind. The first strategy we will see is called cache first. This means that we first, whenever the service worker intercepts a request, we go first in the cache and we try to provide the data, the assets or the response from there if available. And if not, then we fall back to a normal request. This is very good for the case we saw before. So for the so-called offline first approach, where we wanted to provide data, static data, even JavaScript files, providing some dynamic logic when the user is offline. The goal is to provide very fast response, and the response working or available even when the user is offline. On the opposite spectrum, there is also another strategy called network first. Here, we wanted to provide the very latest, the very latest version of some resources that typically update very frequently, and is crucial to provide the latest value of them. Let's say, imagine, for example, we needed to provide the values of a stock exchange list. Therefore, that is very important that we don't provide stale data. Therefore, the service worker first will go over the network, but then if the network is not available, or if there is a timeout that we can define, and this timeout occurs, then we can fall back to the cache. Of course, we won't be able to provide the latest value. Therefore, it's good that we inform the users that they are getting not the latest, but the stale data. But on the other side, we can still provide some data that could still be useful, even when the user is offline. Aside these two pretty simple and basic strategies, there are others that are a little bit more complex and combine the benefits of both. For example, stale while revalidate strategy gives very fast and quick responses, providing the responses and the assets from the cache. But then in the background, also the service worker tries to check over the network if there is a newer version of this requested data, and if so, downloads and updates the cached version of them, so that from next request on, the users will get a fresher version of it, but still a very a little bit of code more. It's not very complex, but indeed starts to pile up a little bit more complexity. However, thanks for us, there are different libraries that we can use. These libraries abstract the complexity and the cache API and allow us developers to concentrate only on the business logic itself. Probably the most important library of them of all is Workbox. Workbox is a set of node modules and libraries that makes it very easy to cache assets and implement caching strategies abstracting from their complexity. It's an open source project from Google, and actually nowadays, if you want to create a production-ready and even complex progressive web app, actually Workbox is your choice. We define or we register routes where we can define a single string to define a target file or file type, or regular expressions. In this snippet, we can see that we target JavaScript files and CSS or style files to be stored in the cache. Then, as a second parameter, we can choose among a set of strategies. And so you can see that with just the invocation of one line of code, one method, we can implement the whole bunch of code that we saw before, in this case, to implement the stale while revalidate strategy. So it's very practical and really takes away from us a lot of complexity. While this set of library is code agnostic, meaning that we can use it with Angular, any JavaScript framework, so React, Vue, or even a vanilla JavaScript, there are other frameworks that provide their own solution, and of course, also Angular. Thanks to the Angular PWA schematic from the version 1.6 available with the Angular CLI, we can turn an existing Angular project into a full-fledged progressive web app. What this command does once run inside the shell or the context of our progressive web app is downloading a set of modules, installing for us, creating a set of files, and configuring them with a default values to make us already up and running in matter of minutes. Let's see now another demo. A very simple Angular progressive web app application. So using Angular as a framework, implementing some basic functionality of it, we will see more in detail later. And then on this Angular project, we ran already, for the sake of time, we ran already this Angular PWA schematic. So we turned our Angular project into a full-fledged Angular progressive web app example or application. Here is the link to the demo, but at the end of the slide you will see also, I will give you the demo for the URL for the GitHub repo for this demo, and even the previous custom offline example with vanilla JavaScript. Okay, so this is the layout that we will see, not super crazy, but we will see later how does it work. Let's see first the code. So I say that we run already this command, and what this Angular PWA schematic command does is download for us the service worker module, register the real service worker file for us, and with a second parameter, makes it available only for production build. This is by default. So all the setup you will see until I will tell you is done by default. So just by running this command, everything is done out of the box for us. So we really, in many cases, it could be already enough. So we really don't have to do absolutely anything to turn our Angular application into a full-fledged progressive web app example. One important thing to say, though, is that this ng, so Angular Service Worker file, is placed in the node modules. So you won't see in your application scope or structure, you won't see it anywhere unless you go within deep inside the Angular path folder inside the node modules. This is so far a kind of limitation of Angular in terms or within progressive web apps, because the service worker is given as a black box. If you try to change anything within this file, so manually you go in the node modules and change anything inside that, then all your changes, as soon as you make a new build, will be reset. So it will be every time wiped out and every time starts from scratch from the initial state. One possible overcome is to create like a custom or a root service worker file that you will register here in the register method. And then within this, let's call it parent service worker, you import on one side the Angular default service worker. And on the other one, on the other side, the custom service worker that you might implement to provide some custom behavior or some logic you want to inject. In that case, then the two files will be imported and you will have the parent file registered here. This is at the moment a possible overcome, so a possible solution. Among registering then the service worker module, we can see here we have the web manifest file that has a set of default values and also a set of files in different sizes, because we always have to have multiple sizes in order to create or to provide the best pixel perfect icon for our users. Of course, if we know already which are the users that we target to, then we can narrow this set and target specifically resolution or sizes for specific devices if we know for sure which are our target users. By default, the icons provided and downloaded are the Angular logo. So interested, but not super interesting. What is more interesting is the ngswconfig.json file. This is the Angular service worker configuration file. And by default, the command creates an asset group property with an array composed of two objects. Here we can see the first one named app, and with install mode with value prefetch, and then a set of files. These files are the target files we want to prefetch, so we want to have in the cache while the service worker is in the install phase, exactly as we saw in the previous demo. So all these files are what compose the app shell, the core of our application, the minimum even to be provided even when the user is offline. One caveat that we have to keep in mind is that if we put too many files or too big sizes here, and the service worker for any reasons is not able to download and fetch one of these files that we specify in this array, in this portion, then the whole install phase of the service worker will be aborted. So the service worker will not be installed for that time. Then as soon as the user refresh the page or access the page again, then the service worker will attempt a newer time to download these files. So it's good to keep in mind to not put too many files here, to keep really to the minimum and try to keep these files small, as small as possible, in order to increase the chances that this prefetch step goes through smoothly and successfully. We can also define other objects. In this case, we have install mode with value lazy for all these files that are not so critical. For example, assets with images or font files. When we define install mode lazy, we tells the service worker of Angular to fetch and the cache in the local cache these files, but only when they are requested at least once. So in a kind of lazy way. We can also define an update mode, in this case prefetch, or we can even define lazy. Prefetch means that for the update mode, that if while the application is running, if the service worker detects that there is a newer version of the cached asset on the server, that it will immediately updates it in the server, in the local cache. We could have used also a value of lazy, and in that case, it would have updated only if requested again. So far, everything is default. So has been created automatically for us by this Angular PWA schematic command. And with the asset groups, we can define all the static assets we want to cache. Just to go further, we can, for example, we might be interesting to cache also the responses coming from APIs. In this case, I wanted to target, for the sake of the demo, two different URLs. One is an URL providing random jokes, and for that I don't want to get always the newest one. I just want to have a very quick response, and because of this I choose a strategy performance. Performance within the context of Angular is the cache first strategy we saw before. So we always go first to the cache if there is the requested URL and then provide from then the response if available. We can even define how many entries, in this case, how many responses we want to cache and for how many minutes or hours or days. So for how long we want to retain it locally. On the other side, we also have another endpoint providing a random cat images. And for that, we have a strategy freshness. Again, freshness is the network first strategy we saw before. Here you can see we can also define a timeout value. In this case, 5 seconds. So that if we make a request and the request is either too slow or we don't get a response at all because we are offline, then the service worker will provide, if available, will provide the data from the local cache. So using asset groups, we can cache static assets. Using data groups, we can provide here a set of target URLs, and we can define which of the two strategies we can use. At the moment, this is another Angular limitation, we cannot implement any other out of the box, or at least any other strategy. There are some workarounds that might make us more or less implement stale while revalidate strategy, but yeah, they are kind of workarounds. It's not the real default way of working. Let's see now how does it work and how does our application look like. So this is our application. We can see that if I refresh it, the joke is always the same because using the performance strategy, it provides the cached value, while we always have a new fresh photo because this comes always from the server. Opening the application tab, we can see that our service worker is up and running. But now, more interestingly, if we open the network tab, let me scroll it, zoom a bit, we can see that the dead joke is served from the service worker, and there is no network traffic for that. While the API providing the cat images is going every time over the network, so we are getting some data over the network. Now, if I go offline and I refresh the page, we can see that not only the response is relatively fast, but also both responses, so not only static assets like icons, the CSS files, the text files are provided, but also the responses that came from these two different APIs are provided. And we can see here now, looking at the network tab, we can see now that even the search or the cats API is coming from the service worker. So we don't have any network exchange. You notice that we have here another file, ng.sw.json. This Angular service worker file is very important. Let me go online again. It's very important because it's downloaded every time we refresh or we access the page. And this file contains a hash map with the list of all cached hash table with a list of all cached assets. You can see here. This is what the service worker uses to detect whether there might be or there is a newer version of an asset or anything that we have cached. So whenever we change anything, then we can have here a check in the hash table, and we can see maybe the icon change or the page or the JavaScript file or whatever. The service worker will detect that there is some changes in it, even a comma, and then will download and updates the cached value. Another interesting thing about this file is that within our Angular application, we can create or implement a kind of parachute parachute option, let's say. When we make a build a production for our production build for our application in our distribution folder, you can see that also this file is created. Now let's imagine I deleted it, so we don't have it anymore in our distribution folder, and then I made a new deployment. Now you will see when I access the page again, you will see here that the service worker will be deleted, and all the data that is cached, we can see all here, all our assets, files, and so on, will all be wiped out for us. Because when we delete this file and the Angular service worker detects that they cannot change it, then you can see here, deleted. Then deletes all the cache and also deletes the service worker. So this can be a kind of a safe mechanism or security mechanism in case we detect a bug or some serious wrong data that our user cached already. Then by making a deployment without this Angular service worker JSON file, we are sure that we can completely wipe out automatically all the cache and the old service worker from the clients. Now, if I open the cache, we can see that we don't have anything installed. And this is because we deleted this Angular service worker file. So this is a nice thing extra to keep in mind also, that is possible thanks to Progressive Web App and thanks to Angular with this schematic command. Now, there is to say that, though, that the service worker uses the Cache API, but the Cache API itself has some limitation. One of them, let me check in the meantime the chat that everything is going good. One of them is that, perfect. One of them is that the Cache API allows to cache only GET calls. What does it mean is that as soon as we have a relatively passive application, when the user just get data, this could be already enough. But how can we do better? How can we provide a better experience? Because let's imagine our users are filling a huge form with all the data and so on, and then just before pressing the post or the submit method, the user is crossing a gallery or simply is offline or she's offline, and then by clicking on the submit button, of course, there is a post. Post is not supported by the Cache API. Therefore, we just provide a message, sorry, 500 or any other not very pleasant, not very nice error message. We can overcome this limitation. There are different possibilities. One of them is using the background sync API. It's a modern, I would say, pretty modern web API, together with IndexedDB. What this API does is that let us defer some actions until the user has, again, a stable connectivity. So, for example, we have this huge form, and before attempting to post all these form data to the server, we save the data, the form data, in the local IndexedDB, and we register a synchronization, giving it a specific name. Then, in this case, it's called post form. Then, if the network connection is available, so the user is online, the sync happens immediately. So the user won't detect any change that there is this background sync step implemented. Everything will just go through smoothly as it would be without it. But if the user is offline, then the sync will be postponed until the connection is restored and available again. So we can keep all these pending requests in the IndexedDB, and once online again, we go through all these pending changes and execute them in the proper order, one by one. So thanks to the service worker, this synchronization happens even if the user navigated away from the page or even closed the browser page with the application. So this happens automatically. The user clicks submit, goes on the home or close the page, and this, if offline, this submit action is frozen there and then shipped once the user is online again. Eventually, if once the post is then submitted, when we are online again, and maybe it fails, we should be able to provide a toast message, or in any case notify the user that the post that has been done maybe even half an hour before went not in a proper way. So pretty simple, but yeah, we have again few lines of code to write. We have to take responsibility of the IndexedDB and so on. However, there is good news for us. Thanks to the Firebase platform, there are some tools we can use. Specifically, we can use the Cloud Firestore. That is a NoSQL database that belongs to this palette or this set of application of within Firebase. Firebase is a Google platform that targets web devices or not devices, mobile devices, so native development, but also web development. And the cool thing of this Cloud Firestore solution is that it allows to store locally and provide the data that we get from the database, even when the user is offline. So it provides offline persistence in a very easy way. Let's see it. While this offline persistence is enabled by default for the mobile development, we have to actively or activate it, calling the enable persistent method. But that's all what we have to do. So we downloaded the Firestore, the Firebase library and the Firestore instance, and then we invoke this method. That's it. Of course, we have to initialize the app, providing the API case that bind our API to the cloud database, but nothing else. From that moment on, once we register these enable offline persistence, then all the requested documents in the context of Firebase, all the database entries are called documents. All these documents are stored locally into IndexedDB, out of the box created for us. And then even when we are offline, these documents are made available for us. So we can edit them, we can delete them, we can do anything we want. As soon as then we go online again, Firestore will detect that there are a set of changes that are pending and automatically synchronize them to the server and propagate to all the other clients connected. This is done with WebSockets and is called three-way binding. What does it mean is that if we have client A, B, and C, and client A changes some document, for example, the title of a blog, and saves it, this change is propagated to the server, and from the server then to the client B and C, that thanks to observables will have their own UI updated without the need of a refresh the page or any kind of polling. And this is done absolutely out of the box thanks to Firestore. Good. Let's see now another demo. this demo uses a combination of technologies, uses Angular, where we already executed the Angular PWA schematic command, plus then we use and we implemented the offline persistence with Cloud Firestore. The goal is to show you how we can access the application, make changes even when we are offline, and showing how our application is still up and running. However, I have to switch again to my Wi-Fi because at the moment I'm on the phone. And since I have to go offline with the phone, the connection will change. So I will switch now to another network. Hopefully everything will go smooth and I will be online soon again. So let's see now the code. The code is, again, an Angular application and is not very complex. Good. Then for this demo, I will show also my phone. One cool thing of Progressive Web App and specifically of Chrome and Android is that if you download or install a Progressive Web App within Chrome, Chrome automatically on the fly will generate a web APK and sign it for us. This allows a lot of nice and cool benefits because, for example, the app called My Places is exactly my web application, Progressive Web App. You can see the web version here on the left side. That is installed on my phone. But the cool thing is that if you look at the bottom in the app details, it's written app installed from Google Play Store, but I don't have my app installed there. Nevertheless, thanks to this web APK signed when we install it within Chrome and in Android device, the application will be displayed exactly in the apps list, exactly as it would be a native app. Another cool thing is that you can see the amount of kilobyte used as internal storage is really, really nothing compared to a native app. The other aspect is that our Progressive Web App, you can see here, this is my Progressive Web App, and for that I use the value display standalone. If you remember before, we said that by using this value, our Progressive Web App will be opened in a completely different tab. So it's not within the Chrome tab section or collection, but is exactly presented in a separate, independent or standalone tab, as it would be indeed a native app. This again to further stress the concept of Progressive Web App willing to emulate as close as possible the experience, rich experience that the users can get from a native app. So you can see we have, first of all, a responsive layout. On the phone, we have just one line of cards. On the desktop, we have two. Now, let me show you what is the three-way binding. So if I go in the details of one entry, we can see offline from a previous conference the title, and I save it. We can see that immediately this change is propagated now on my phone. So on the application that is now installed on my phone. As a domain, or just a few words about what is this application, is it's a pet project or a personal project of mine that I use to keep track of cool breweries or bars or any restaurant that really I found interesting and cool whenever I go visiting. When still it was possible to go around. And then maybe I keep track of them so I can suggest or actually highly discourage to go there to a friend of mine. Simply to test a little bit of technologies. Here, for example, we have the web API that allow us to share some content straight with through our web application. But now Let's see what is really, really cool of this set of technologies. So we have progressive web app that allow us to have offline content. We have not now. We have offline persistence thanks to the Cloud Firestore. So now I switch to airplane mode on my phone. So now I'm completely offline with my phone. Let's imagine we are traveling. We are going to the mountain, in the gallery, wherever. Our application is offline. We are completely offline. But you see, I refresh the page and still I get all my content. Plus, let's change it. For example, Enoteca al Volto, not to make publicity, but it's a real cool place in Venice. If you have a chance, by all means, go there. And I save it. I change the title. I remove the edit from the title. You can see in the browser version is still there. Of course, now we don't have any more synchronization because our phone, or we are traveling, we are, of course, detached. We are not online anymore. But still, we have our application up and working. We can change another title just for the sake of the demo. We save it, and again, we have these two changes that are at the moment only on my phone. But even though I'm offline, I can still see, access my PWA, and I can, thanks to Firestore, I can still access the documents and change them. So I can even make, of course, locally, some post actions. Now, I go online again, so I will remove the airplane mode. And what I would expect is that all these changes, actually these just two changes, will be automatically, or let's say automagically, synchronized to the other client. So it will go over the server, and the server will push these changes to my application. Here is the local host, but still connected to the same database. So you can see here it was also quite fast. We have now the changes that have been done only on my phone now have been synchronized also on the other client. And this has done pretty straightforward for us. Actually, I didn't implement anything anything extra to achieve this behavior. This is the default when we use progressive web apps, when we use the enable or offline persistence provided by Firestore. Of course, we have to create the queries to fetch the data from the database, but all what concerns this auto sync is done out of the box for us. So really, really cool. And with this example, I hope I could give you, I would say, an explanation or an example that indeed offline web applications nowadays don't work anymore. And I will, before leaving, I will give you some more links or so to stimulate further the appetite for progressive web apps. These are some really cool, actually, this we don't want it, very cool websites that are kind of a gallery of examples that we can have, where we can get some examples of cool demos or cool application we can implement with progressive web apps. And others, for example, PWA stats, far on the right, are successful stories of different companies that witness how we can benefit from, on different levels and from different domains, from the usage of progressive web apps. Now the question is, okay, well, it's very cool so far, everything looks great, so will then PWAs take over native apps? Well, I would say, I don't know, or maybe not yet. This because there are still a lot of let's say, limitations. One of them, I don't hear you. No, non vi sento. Sorry.
Ok,
Okay,
eccoci.
now it's okay. I hear you. Sorry. We
Ok,
got lost in connection, let's say. Yeah,
yeah.
unfortunately, not even the let's say streaming web application are still capable of offline capabilities. But to wrap up, indeed, just a few details about what are the limitations of progressive web apps so far. One is that progressive web apps can do only what web applications can do. For example, we don't have rich access to rich functionalities that are core in our phone. For example, still is possible with Fugu APIs. For example, we want to access the contact list of our application. So far, it was precluded to web applications. Now, thanks to these experimental web APIs, for example, contact list API, we can provided a way to access within the context of a web application to the contact list of a phone, for example, even though it's still very, very experimental and only within the context of usage of Chrome. And finally, native apps have in general better performances. So if we make a game or something a little bit more complex, maybe a native app could be a better choice. That said, I would like to thank you all of you for the attention. I hope I could make you even more eager to get information about PWAs. I hope you liked the presentation. Here are my media, social media, and other contacts. You can get on the GitHub repo. You can get the demo for the Angular PWA example and even for the vanilla JavaScript demo. Plus, there is the link for the dev platform where I wrote a series of articles about Angular and progressive web apps specifically. And just if you want to follow me on Twitter, I tweet from time to time about technical curious things, or if new things in the environment of or in the constellation of Angular and progressive web apps is released, or even about modern web APIs. That said, once again I would like to thank you all, and I give you now the voice again to the director.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for this amazing speech. It was a great speech, so congrats.
Thank you.
Maybe we will share this slide and those links in the next days within our social accounts. So we have some questions. So maybe I
Sure.
can start to share that. The first question is, after you install the Pivot on your mobile device, is the app still able to access the data saved when the app was in the browser?
No, because or it depends which data you mean. But if you think about the cached data, that no. Or if you were using the browser in the phone, let's say you were using the PWA
Mhm.
version there, and then you install it, then yes, because then you would be the same device. But if you think about of using I don't know, a different browser or a different machine, of course, in that case, no, because it's local to the device you are using. But as long as you use the same device, then yes.
Okay, great. And the second question is, in your experience, what kind of files or what we should consider core we should put in the install mode?
Yeah. Let's imagine, and if you go to Google Web Devs docs, you can see there a list of indication of what is the app shell. Actually, as a minimum, is just the bare minimum style files. So maybe the header, color, maybe the icon if you have a logo of a company or of your blog, and that's it. But there is no really a direction or a guide for that. Like, let's imagine again now for example, the Labyrinth game of Trivago. So they had a pretty complex set of files that compose this offline page. So of course there is a JavaScript file that is all the logic of the Labyrinth game that also uses some APIs or probably libraries to detect how the phone with gyroscope is moved, and then you have some static files is the DOM and the styles. So there is no really a clear or a strict measure or indication like you have just a HTML file or just a CSS file. You are free. Of course, you have to use good sense and not to have a huge amount of files to save there. Like for example, 40 megabyte or something like this, because these files are installed while are downloaded while the service is installed. So the smaller, the better. But there is no really hard limit.
Okay.
It depends on your
Thank
case.
you. Here we have Lorenzo and Hermano. So nice to have you guys.
Hi, Francesco. Thanks for your talk. It was very interesting.
Thank you guys for having me and for organizing. Yeah, please.
I have some question. Very easy question. The first one was in the App Store or Play Store, we have some kind of support to publish PVA, or we can't?
No, we can't. And actually, good for us, there is another tool. It's called from Microsoft. It's open source. And in the last now it's maybe already 1 year, but they released the latest version. The tool is called the PWA Builder, and allows you very easily to create a web application where you can use this as a kind of a skeleton. And within this APK, you kind of put your PWA, and then it's very easy to install it to the Play Store, for example. What this PWA Builder tool does is that you follow a few steps, and then it generates for you this skeleton, let's say, and then you just have to move inside the files, the distribution files of your PWA, and that's it. After that, then you have a really it's like it would be a native Android app, and you can then very easily to upload the ship and install. Of course, there will be some checks, but it will be easy to install it and have it in the Play Store. And this is actually a very good thing, because with that we can further increase our reach for our users. That we go not only through the Play Store, so not only through the all audience that we get via the native apps, even though it's a PWA, and also through our web apps. Bad notes are for iOS or Apple devices. There it is possible, but I never tried that, and I really talked with a lot of other developers or colleagues, and it was really a drama, because you really have to contact them by writing emails, and there is a lot of coming and going communication. There is no really an easy way to say, okay, I create this file, I follow these steps, and it's done. No, every time you have to find a way, and maybe they can see, no, this is not secure enough, and they reject it. So it's possible, maybe if you're lucky, but it's not easy in the iOS environment or world.
Okay, thank you. And as use case where you totally say to me to avoid using PVA.
I would not see a way when to avoid it, because the good things of PWA is now I've showed you a lot of different cases, and we don't have to, when we think to PWAs, it doesn't mean that we have to implement all these features or capabilities. For example, we can just provide or implement the cache first strategy for just some files. But doesn't mean that this, because we need or we wanted to provide these files even when the user is offline. But maybe we are not interested to provide these files the latest version. Let's imagine a blog website where maybe the avatar of our users don't really change so often. In that case, maybe we can cache them and then deliver them from the local cache. So we can save a lot of network requests, and the responses are very fast. And this could be one thing. Then we can forget about offline persistence or even others. So I don't see really something that say, oh no, if you have this case or if you have this domain, absolutely not, the AWS is not your case.
Oh, okay. When you come back, how many times you come back in Italy?
It's fun that you ask, because after a lot of time I was in Switzerland. Now I am in Rimini. Actually, I'm here in Romagna, and I'm really enjoying the time here. But usually, yeah, I come like when things are normal, like once every 3 months, and so. Would be nice to be once even in Rome and so on. So you guys live, maybe have a glass of wine together.
Ok, grazie. Scusa, sorry for my English.
It's great, and it's good. Maybe it was better for me talking in English, because my Italian maybe is getting worse and not as good as once. No,
Speaking of this,
grazie mille, ragazzi.
Speaking of this, I want to have just a second to say something in Italian for who is watching us. Se avete delle domande in italiano potete tranquillamente farle, le traduciamo noi, quindi mandatele pure, insomma. Ok, switch in English again.
Okay.
Go ahead, Manno.
Okay. No, I do have a question about caching. So, of course, you said there is a way to wipe out the cache. So you can remove the worker and everything will be deleted. But have you had experience in other ways to deleting the cache? So let's say we call an API and we want to invalidate something starting from, you know, a user action, or either, and that's the real question, in a push way. So let's say thing is changing on the server, you want to, you know, invalidate, let's say, the avatar of the user. Okay. So invalidation in general.
Invalidation, we have different ways. Actually, the normal way, I can switch again to the code we saw before for the first table. There the possibility to use the cache API. The cache API exposes a delete method, and the delete method accepts a key. The key is the name of the cache. So this would be just a way to say, okay, I start now with a new version of my service worker. Just iterate through all the keys, so all the caches I have, and then just delete them all. This is kind of a cleanup phase. But we can use also the normal delete method when the user on the client, for example, clicks on a button or something. Or, for example, there could be a code, or there could be something. Now, through push notification could also be, because the push notification gets intercepted, first of all, from the service worker. So it depends which kind of message we have there, or if we get from a server, maybe some information, some code, then it depends on our logic. We can interpret that and tells to the service worker, hey, something is changed. Maybe we have the API or the key of the cache that need to be invalidated, and then programmatically we can delete it. We have to keep in mind, though, that the service worker does not have direct access to the page. We can do this in an indirect way through messages, but it's still possible. So it's possible from the web application to communicate to the service worker in this indirect way. So in case we have maybe Angular service that get back a message or from the service a response, and maybe we know that something is changed, and so with this we want to tell the service worker the cache, I don't know, logos has to be invalidated and completely wiped for that specific client.
Okay, thank you. That was very clear. And in fact, as you said, you need to communicate by messages. In fact, if you go on the web developer tool, you can send test messages to the web worker. So that's the usual way to communicate with them. So yeah,
Exactly.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
I think we haven't. So probably we have done with the questions. I want to say again thank you, Francesco, for this amazing speech, and to Lorenzo and Hermano to have been here with us.
Grazie a voi.
So
Grazie.
let's say hi to the guys.
Okay. Have a good night, guys. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
And also thanks to Luciano.
Of course, Luciano, that it's our director for this speech. So thank you for being stayed with us. The last things I want to say for the first two of you that will do a tweet on Twitter and mentioning our page, we will share with you some JetBrains license. So let's tweet us. And thank you. See you in the next meetup. Bye.